In this video, we're going to talk about how to get into the best shape of your life, training only once a week for 35 minutes. And if you're anything like me, you're probably fed up. Fed up of fitness programs that didn't work. Programs that worked but were impossible to stick to. Or programs that demanded so much time and energy that real life eventually got in the way. Trust me, I know. I was that guy for 30 years. But here's the truth most people never hear. We've been lied to. The fitness industry isn't designed to make unfit people fit. It's designed to make fit people fitter. It's built by people whose entire life revolves around fitness. The gym, meal prepping, jogging, tracking every calorie. And then they tell you, the busy professional, the entrepreneur, the father, the middle-aged guy with real responsibilities, to live like they do. If you want the body they've got. They design the clothes, the supplements, the equipment, the lifestyle. And then they say, just do this, buy this, track this. Meanwhile, you're thinking, mate, I've got a real life. So in this video, I'm going to show you the 6 steps you need to build a head-turning physique and keep it. We're going to move away from packed, sweaty gyms, jogging, and joyless diets to being strong, fit, confident, and jacked. Training once a week for just 35 minutes. If you're new here, my name's Imdad, and I help busy professional men get into the shape of their lives using a simple phase system that doesn't take over your life. It adapts to it. It's called the ONE35 Body System. I help men build a strong, muscular, fit, confidence-boosting body without all the stuff they hate and simply don't have time for. No gym 3 to 5 times a week, no jogging, and honestly, have you ever seen a jogger smiling? No calorie counting every mouthful. Because even if you do make progress that way, most people lose it again. Not because they're lazy, but because the system was never built for a life with work, business, kids, and responsibility. So let's forget that. Now, if you want to go deeper into this, I also have a free email newsletter. It's a 3-minute-a-day read, simple, practical, and actually usable. I call it an age reversal kit because imagine having the wisdom you have now in a younger, stronger body. That's not about living longer. That's about doubling the quality of your life. Everything in that newsletter is built from over 30 years of trial and error. Training 5 days a week, trying every diet, early morning runs, balancing family, business, and work, and getting nowhere to now. Training once every 14 days, 35 minutes at home, and in the best shape of my life. With the 6-pack, I thought just wasn't meant for me. At 47 years old. You'll find the link in the description. So now let's dive in. And you might be wondering, Imdad, what makes you qualified to talk about a fitness revolution when you don't look like Chris Hemsworth? Well, let's talk about that. So let me tell you my story. I grew up in 80s London, and as you can see from this picture, I was a skinny kid. This was probably the beginning of when I was starting to shoot upwards. So I became a tall, skinny kid. But as you can see, I wasn't just a tall, skinny kid. I was a tall, skinny packy. And that singled me out for bullying. And being, tall and skinny, what you generally tall and skinny people do is they try and hide that tall, skinny body in XL clothes. I used to always wear clothes that were just way too big for me to hide my skinny frame. Now, being a tall, skinny packy, I was always bullied. Always bullied ever since I could remember. And the latest bully, what did he do? He smashed my face in with a brick. And this is the picture you can see after I actually got smashed in with a brick. I can see I had a black eye, depressed, sad. And I swore to myself then that I was never gonna get bullied again. But how could I stop bullies from bullying me? I thought, I know, I'm gonna hit the gym. And this is actually the first gym I ever went to. It's decked out now, very different to what it was back then. But I thought that was the way to stop bullies bullying me. Putting on muscle, being strong, and fighting back. So I did that for 20 plus years. And the results of all that weight training, all that gym going, all the fitness programs and diets and supplements provided to me by the fitness industry, this is the results after 20 years of hard work. As you can see, not much to show for. So I realized I've got to change this. I can't keep going on like this. And so I started to follow a training program by a famous fitness guru, and I actually started getting results then. I started putting on muscle. I started cutting back some of the fat that I did start to put on. As you can see, you know, things were shaping up, but I didn't quite look like the fitness guru that I wanted to look like, which is this guy here. It just wasn't happening. So I started to adapt the training and incorporated the fitness philosophy or the training philosophy of Dorian Yates. Now, if you guys haven't heard of Dorian Yates, he was 6 times Mr. Olympia, British guy, massive guy. So he was a proponent of high intensity training. So I actually adapted my training that I did from Athlean-X to Dorian and adapted with Dorian Yates' philosophy, and it actually started to work really well. And then lockdown came, and during lockdown obviously no one was going to the gyms, they were all locked down. So I started training with bands, and this is James Grage. He was a big proponent on YouTube of bands back then. He was actually a pro bodybuilder, and he started working exclusively with bands for 4 years, and he said he didn't notice any difference. So I started incorporating all this stuff into my own unique system, and it was working quite well, to be honest. You know, I was training at that time 3 days a week until one day when I was riding my bike at my favorite bike park. So I'm an avid mountain biker, and this is my favorite bike park, Chicksands Bike Park. It's about an hour or so from London, and this is my favorite run. And in this run I actually went flying into a tree. I got knocked out unconscious. I felt okay at the time, but then afterwards I realized I wasn't actually okay, because when I went to the gym again and started to lift weights, I actually couldn't lift weights anymore, or heavy weights, because every time, for example, when I was doing the bench press, when I was lifting the bar, my arm was vigorously shaking. So I knew I've actually done some serious damage to my back. So what I thought is that I just thrown it all away. All that, you know, finally after 20 years of not getting anywhere, I started to get somewhere, and I've just thrown it all away. So I started researching alternative ways of training, and I stumbled upon this guy, Joshua Trentine. So he was a proponent of his own machine that he created that used a super slow protocol with eccentric overload, which is where when you're lowering the weights, rather than the weights like what you do in traditional weights being easier, you actually need to make it harder, because your eccentric part of the motion actually has much more power. And so you actually need to make the weight heavy on the way down, but you can't do that with traditional weights because obviously they're working with gravity. So he created this machine with his unique cams that did that. And he is a pro bodybuilder, a champ pro bodybuilder, and he was actually doing it with lighter weights. So I actually like messaged him a few times on Instagram, because obviously he's all the way over in America, and I started to speak to him about my training, how could I incorporate it with bands. And then eventually he said you couldn't, but I thought, let me go and try it out. And you can, and it actually works better with bands. And then I moved from training 3 days a week with the old style of training to training only once. Initially it was twice a week, then I moved that down to once a week, and now I train once a fortnight, and this is the results I got. In the best shape of my life, training once a fortnight using my unique bands and my unique training system. And finally, after 30 plus years, I got the six pack I was chasing and the body I was chasing as a kid. I was so amazed by these results. I actually contacted my old university's sports science department to do scientific studies on my training, because I'm so confident that it's more effective than the traditional 3 to 5 day training programs provided by the fitness industry. I want to put it under scientific scrutiny, and this is me here in the lab of the sports science department testing it out with students with my training. And not only that, obviously training alone is not going to get you the results. So I actually did a video podcast with the UK's leading sports nutritionist for elite athletes, and with help from her I actually crafted a unique nutrition plan for my single 35-minute training session per week. And not only that, I actually met with Nick Littlehales, read his book, went out and met him and showed him my training program. And I've adapted his R90 sleep program. If you don't know who Nick Littlehales is, by the way, he's the sleep coach for the 2012 GB Olympics team, the famous 1% team that won so many gold medals. And sleep was an integral part of that success, and I think he was also the first sleep coach in the world. He was the sleep coach and probably still is for Ronaldo and many other famous athletes. So I incorporated his R90 system into also my ONE35 system, and now I'm not only getting those results for myself, I'm also getting those results for my clients. And as you can see here, Justin, who got amazing results. And as you can see, Justin used to train 3 times a week. And he was really skeptical that once a week would get him the results that he used to get when he was training 3 times a week. And he actually got better results training in my system once a week than when he was training 3 times a week. Or Bilal, who, as you can see here, he tried everything, but nothing worked like this. And as you can see, he said this program has changed his life. And it truly, when you speak to him, is a part of the ONE35 crew, it has literally changed his life. He's a completely different person now, because he's got energy, he's got vitality, and he's just, he's fantastic. He's playing badminton twice a week. He's much more active with his children, and it's really, truly changed his life. And this is Bilal. This is Bilal about 2 years ago to him, for him out here, 4 months into the program. Look at the transformation. So it's not only a physical transformation. That's the beautiful thing about this. When you change your physical being, you change your internal being, and he's become a completely different person. This is him with his son, quad bike. I think it was Morocco or Dubai, I can't remember. And look at him, he's so happy with playing with his kids. He found that difficult before because he preferred to just sit there and watch Netflix. And when he posted this in the group, this is the response from one of the team members. They said, what has happened to the belly? And then Bilal responded, said, yeah, I had to do a double take myself. As you can see, he says, what can I say? I just look and feel amazing. Or Asif, who's 50, in his 50s, father of 4, he was so impressed with the program. It's made him more stronger, fitter, more athletic, and full of energy at 53 years old. He lives in Saudi Arabia and was so impressed with it, he took me out to Saudi Arabia to bring 135 to Saudi Arabia. So this is the transformation it's causing. This is the transformation it's giving people, transforming their lives so that the latter part of their lives is actually more fruitful, energetic, and powerful than the earlier part of their lives. So what I'm going to do in this 3-part mini-series, I'm going to cover the 3 biggest problems people face when they do try and get into shape or a body transformation. The first of those that we're going to cover in this particular video is time, which is probably the biggest reason people fail or don't even start to try and get into shape, because they simply don't have the time. The second of those is simplicity, because traditional training programs provided by the fitness industry are just too complicated. They're just too hard to maintain, which leads me on to the first point, or the third point, sorry, which is one that lasts. Getting into shape and staying into shape. Because getting into shape is, okay, it's not easy, but it's easier than staying into shape for the rest of your life. So let's cover the first problem, which is time. You see, the fitness industry tells you that you need to go to the gym at least 3 to 5 days a week, an hour and a half each time. Now, who has got the time for that? You may manage it for the first week or 2 weeks, but then after that, you just, life becomes life, and you just find that too difficult to maintain. Whereas in the 135 Body Blueprint, you don't need to go to the gym 3 to 5 days a week. All you need to do is train once a week. Once a week over 3.5 times a week. And not an hour and a half each time, only 35 minutes. And the beautiful thing about it is you never need to go to the gym again, because you train in the comfort of your own home. Or if you want, you can train outside in the park. I've trained in the park. I like to train. My favorite place to train is actually in the garden. I've got my own basketball hoop, which I use for the training system. Or you can train in a hotel room. You never ever need to miss a training session again. And they're probably thinking, how on earth is that possible? When the fitness industry tells you need to train 3 to 5 days a week, and you're saying 35 minutes. One of the biggest reaction or responses that I get, people think I'm just lying. That's impossible. Or when I tell them 35 minutes a week, they think you said 35 minutes a day, right? I said, no, I said 35 minutes a week. Now, let me tell you how that's possible. Now, my view is the only reason you should actually be doing training, the only training you should be doing is to make your muscles bigger and stronger. That's the only reason you should be training. Now, the question then becomes, how do you do that? And the two questions in making your muscles bigger and stronger, there are two fundamental questions we need to understand, rather than just following bro science, going with the flow, doing what has always been done. Let's start with the essence of what muscles, how muscles grow. Now, the two questions we need to answer in understanding that is, first, why do muscles grow? And then secondly, when do muscles grow? So let's tackle the first one. Why do muscles grow? Now, the natural, logical answer to that, muscles grow when you're lifting weights. So there's some sort of symbiotic relationship between weights and muscles. But the reality is, muscles don't know that you're lifting a weight. All they know is that it's facing resistance. Now, that resistance could be a weight, or it could be a rock, or it could be that you're fighting a bear. All it knows is that you're facing resistance. Now, the reasons muscles grow is that they face a resistance too great for the muscle to bear. So this is now, so the body goes into survival mode, because in its mind, let's say, for example, you were fighting a bear and you just managed to repel the bear. The muscles started failing, they started damaging, but you survived. So the muscle thinks, if he faces that bear again, if he sees that bear again, I need to make sure he's stronger next time so that he can defeat the bear again, or get away from the bear. It's a survival mechanism. So the stimulus of resistance to failure, because you need to train to failure to make those muscles grow, because there's no other reason for the muscle to grow then. The body doesn't want to grow. It takes a lot of energy for the body to grow. And one of the fundamentals of life, of your body and all living things, is to conserve energy. So in order to expend energy to make new muscles, there has to be a reason, and that reason is survival, in order to make you survive your next encounter with that overload of the muscles. So look at this table here. If there's no stimulus, if there is no resistance taking that muscle to failure, literally there is no growth. So if you've done this before, if you've just swung weights around, you get tired, yet you sweat, but the muscle has no stimulus, has no reason to grow. So there's no growth. Or if there's a weak stimulus, the growth will also be weak. But what you need to do is give a strong stimulus. If you give the muscles a strong enough stimulus, that's when you get strong growth. Does that make sense? But if you overstimulate it, what you get is no growth, because what you actually get is damage. So you have to have a perfect balance of strong stimulus, not weak stimulus or overstimulus, but the perfect strong stimulus. And that's why I call it optimum overload. I call my training system optimum overload because it overloads the muscles to their optimum capacity. I hope this is making sense. Now, my training system, why does it overload the muscles to their optimum capacity? Because it has these 4 key pillars. The first of those, and as you can see it spells life, is low risk. Now this is so important because lifting weights is a sure path to getting injured. There was I think a study done that it polled people that weight trainers, resistance trainers using weights in the gym. And in the last 6 months, 25% of them suffered an injury due to weight training. So there's no point in training and then getting injured, because then you can't train. So any progress you have made is just going to go out the window, especially as you get older. Especially as you get older, that risk factor increases. So you have to make sure primarily that the training you do is of low risk. Now, because I use resistance bands in my training, rather than it's not only low risk, it's actually better for your muscles, because in my view, the resistance and the elasticity of the bands actually matches the elasticity of your muscles and tendons. And I've had clients who've come with an injury, and actually the training has eradicated that injury and made the tendons and muscles stronger. So the first pillar is low risk. If you get injured, well, there's no, it's actually you've gone backwards rather than forwards. The second of those is increase in intensity. Now, this is a fundamental important principle that weights completely doesn't tap into. Your muscles have a range of power through the range of motion. And what do I mean by that? When you, for example, if you're doing a press up, a great example is the press up. I'm guessing we've all done press ups. Press ups are hardest at the bottom when you're just coming off the ground, and they're easiest at the top. Why is that? Because when you're doing a press up, you're lifting a static weight, which is your body. At the bottom of the movement, at the beginning of the movement, is when your muscles are weakest. So when you're lifting your body off the floor in the press up, the load is the same, but your muscle is in the weakest state. Does that make sense? So that's why it's the most difficult. When you're here, it's the same load, but why does it feel easier? Because that's when your muscles have the most power. Now, here's the problem with weights. Weights are static, just like your body. So when you're lifting weights through any exercise you're doing, it's going to be, for example, if it's a 10 kg weight you're lifting, it's 10 kgs at the weakest phase and 10 kgs at the strongest phase. It's the same throughout, which doesn't match your muscles' power range. It needs to get harder or heavier when your muscles get stronger, which is at the top of the motion, which you don't get with weights, but you do get with resistance bands. Why is that? Because resistance bands have less resistance at the beginning of the motion and more resistance at the end of the motion, which is perfectly aligned to how your muscles work. So you have increase in intensity. The F is for full fibers. Now, what do I mean by full fibers? Your muscles are made up of generally two types of muscle fibers. The first of those is your slow twitch muscle fibers, and then you have fast twitch muscle fibers. They're actually two types of fast twitch muscle fibers, but let's just call them for, the fast twitch for simplicity. Slow twitch, fast twitch. The slow twitch muscle fibers are the muscle fibers you use for everyday activities. So like me, I'm sitting, I'm using slow twitch muscle fibers. I'm using slow twitch muscle fibers in my neck to hold up my head. I'm using slow twitch muscle fibers in my back to support my torso. You use slow twitch muscle fibers when you're working or just doing everyday activities, because slow twitch muscle fibers are designed for low intensity, long duration activities. Your fast twitch muscle fibers are the opposite of that. You use your fast twitch muscle fibers for high intensity, high load activities like lifting weights. And here's the problem. When you're weight training, you're only, or vast majority, using only the fast twitch muscle fibers. Why? Because you're lifting heavy loads and you're lifting them at quite high speeds. So you're only tapping into your fast twitch muscle fibers. The slow twitch muscle fibers get completely or hardly used. They only get used for stabilization, but they don't get overloaded because, as we said, remember, you need to give it a strong stimulus to give it a strong growth. So your fast twitch muscle fibers don't grow in traditional weight training. That's where the beauty of training with bands in a super slow protocol. Now, when you're training, what I do, rather than doing 1 second up or 1 second down, or what I started to do with high intensity training, 1 second up, 3 seconds down, which is around 4 to 5 seconds per rep. Using the super slow protocol, what you do is you actually lift you go through the motions in 10 seconds. 10 seconds up and then 10 seconds down. 20 seconds over a traditional one, which is around 5 seconds, 4 times as long. And because you're using increasing intensity, what's happening through the range of motion is that you'll start off with your slow twitch muscle fibers, and then as it gets more difficult, you start tapping into your fast twitch muscle fibers, and then fast and then slow again. So you're cycling through the muscle fibers and overloading all of them. Does that make sense? And because you're doing it at a much slower pace, you're removing all momentum from the movement. And because you're removing momentum from the movement, you're focusing all the stress on the muscles you're exercising. That's why you're tapping into full fibers. And the most important one, or not the most important one, but the important one that is missed out with weights is eccentric overload. So as I mentioned to you, your weights actually have about 30% more power in the eccentric phase of the motion, which is when you're, not contracting, but retracting the muscle. And muscles, when they're overloaded in the eccentric, they have far more propensity to grow. Now, weights it's very difficult with weights to overload the eccentric. You either need to have someone spotting you so that you can actually add more weight than you can lift, and then they help you on the way down, or it will sort of help you on the way down, or you need to do what that pro bodybuilder I mentioned to you, Joshua Trentine, did. He created his own custom machines with custom cams that could overload the eccentric. But it's extremely difficult to do with weights. But in my training, you do all of these 4 pillars. It's low risk because it's slower, resistance bands, and matching your muscles' natural power output. It's increasing intensity, so it matches your muscle power output. It's tapped into the full fibers, your slow and fast twitch. And as you will see in the video that I'm about to show you, it overloads the eccentric phase of the motion. That's why you only need to train once a week for 35 minutes, because you completely overloaded your muscles. Does that make sense? And let's watch a video of me doing one of my exercises. As you can see here in this video, I'm doing a lateral raise, a shoulder fly, and I've got the bands, as you can see, attached. And I've got my unique mat. So these bands are my custom designed bands with design registrations all over the world, and my custom design mat. So watch me doing this movement. As you can see, I go super slow. 10 seconds on the way up. That's tapping into the full fibers, your slow and your fast twitch. And also you've got the increasing intensity, because as you lift the resistance goes from weaker to stronger as your muscles go from weaker to stronger. And then here's the beauty, here's the magic. That's why I've got the mat. I'm able to increase the intensity on the way down by moving my pivot point, which in this exercise are my feet. And that gives me an increased resistance on the way down, and also on the way down as on the way up is 10 seconds. And I go through this cycle until I reach failure and beyond. And when you do that, you give your muscles such a strong stimulus to grow that you grow faster, in a much more efficient way, in a much more natural way for your body. So I hope that's clear now why muscles grow. Muscles grow due to a stimulus to the muscles that the muscles couldn't take. And that causes micro damage in the muscles, which you then, with your nutrition and sleep, you enable and you create that perfect scenario and perfect situation for the muscles to then grow stronger and bigger. So that's why do muscles grow. Now the question is to ask is, when do muscles grow? Now most people think, and this is the completely wrong conception, is that muscles grow when you're training. That's completely wrong. Muscles don't grow when you're training. They don't grow, as you can see this guy, when you're lifting weights in the gym. Muscles are actually damaged when you're training, and they actually grow when you're not training, when you're supplementing your body with the sufficient proteins, nutrients and conditions with rest, recovery and sleep for those muscles to grow, because now you put your body into a damaged state. Does that make sense? Now that brings us on to the reality of the energy, what I call the energy conundrum. You see, your body has a finite amount of energy. Now that energy, if we focus in on training, needs to be used for the training. Importantly, as we said, because muscles don't grow when you're training, they grow when you're not training in the recovery process, and the same energy, or your body's energy, needs to be used to grow those muscles. Now, traditional training, because you are not overloading your muscles to the optimum capacity, you're giving it a weak stimulus, because weights are a poor tool for the job of growing muscles. You have to go to the gym all the time. You need to go at least 3 to 5 days a week, and you're exerting a lot of energy in that training, because the training is hard. And now, because you want your muscles to grow, you actually need to have more energy, consume more energy for that training 3 to 5 day cycle, and then recovery and growth process. But because the stimulus is so weak, as we mentioned before, the actual energy you're putting in is all going into the training, and the stimulus is not strong enough, so there isn't much recovery and growth. So as you can see here, you're just constantly going through the cycle. All that energy is taken up in the training because you have to go so often. Whereas in the ONE35 body system, because your stimulus is optimum for those muscles to grow, you're hitting the muscles from multiple angles, you do exert energy in the training, but you actually reserve most of that energy to recover and grow, because that's when the muscles are actually growing. Does that make sense? Your muscles, as mentioned, don't grow when you're training, they grow when you're not training. So if you're using up all the energy, as you can see from the traditional training programs, you don't have enough energy to recover and grow. And this is what they're called in bodybuilding overtraining. But in the ONE35 body system, we only train once a week for 35 minutes. We exert energy in that, but we conserve the energy for what we actually went to the training for, what we actually did the exercises for, which is to grow bigger and stronger muscles. Does that make sense? So the question isn't how often do I need to train? The question is, how little do I need to train? Because you want to conserve that energy for actually growing the muscles. Does that make sense? And this is what we want as busy professionals with real lives, work, responsibilities, families. We don't have 3 to 5 days a week to train in the gym. So what we want is maximum output from minimum input, which is exactly what you get from the ONE35 body system. So we've covered growing muscles, how you only need 35 minutes a week to grow muscles in the most effective and efficient way. But what about the other side of the equation, which is dropping fat? Because there's no point growing muscles if those muscles are covered in what I call bubble wrap, because no one can see them. So what about dropping fat? Doesn't that take a lot of time? Doesn't that take a lot of effort and time out of your week? Because the traditional training programs and fitness industry tell you need to go jogging 3 to 5 days a week. And I see them early in the morning out jogging, because otherwise you're not going to lose fat. This is what they tell you, right? But the reality is you don't need to go jogging 3 to 5 days a week, because what jogging does, it doesn't burn fat, it burns carbs. And I'll show you why. And the beauty of the ONE35 body system is that you never ever need to go jogging again. You don't need to take those mornings out or in the evenings when you come back from work to go jogging. So you never have to do that again. And I'll explain why now. So this is really important to understand. What is fat? In terms of, if we look at it in the understanding of energy, fat is two things when we're looking at it from the energy perspective. Fat is stored energy, and fat is slow energy. Now, what do I mean by that? Fat is energy that your body doesn't need right now. So what your body does, it stores it, and it stores it in your body's fat cells, which is what we don't want, right? We don't want energy to be stored in our fat cells, because what that means is that we're having too much energy, we're consuming too much energy that our body needs. So our body's got to put it somewhere, it puts it in the fat cells. What fat also is, as mentioned, is slow energy. Fat is burned when we're doing slow intensity or low intensity, long duration activity. So it's used for slow energy. Why is it used? Because fat takes a lot longer for the body to transfer into the body's energy currency, which is ATP. The body's energy currency isn't fat or carbs, it's actually ATP. Carbs in the form of glucose and glycogen is much quicker for the body to turn into energy, ATP, and that's why it's the primary source of fuel. Fat is the secondary source of fuel, but it's used as a primary source when you're doing slow energy activities. Now let's go into this a bit deeper. These are my 3 simple rules of fat burning. The first of those is that you need to turn on your body's fat burning switch, which I will explain in the coming slide. You need to reduce your energy input, which is the energy you're consuming through food. And you need to increase, importantly, your slow energy output. You need to increase your slow energy output. So it's not just any output, any energy output you need to increase. You need to increase your slow energy output. And I'll explain more in the coming slides. So the first of those is turning on your body's fat burning switch. And what your body's fat burning switch is low insulin. Now, what is insulin? Insulin is released by the pancreas, and it's a protein that actually is excreted by the pancreas to control blood sugar levels. Now, how the blood sugar levels rise is when you're having too much, or when you're having increased, let's say, energy in the forms of primarily sugar in your food. And that sugar doesn't mean directly sugar, it means carbs. So if you're having high carbs, your body is going to realize from when you start to see it, and then you sense it, and then you smell it, and then you put it in your mouth and you start to crunch it, the body starts to realize, hold on a second, there's a lot of sugar coming my way. And so in order to reduce that sugar in the blood, the body releases insulin. And then what insulin does, it tries to pack away or store away that increased blood sugar. Where does it put it? It has one of 3 places it can put it. One of them is your muscles. So the muscles can store sugar in the form of glycogen. The second one is it can store it in the liver. And the third one, which is what we don't want, it can store it in your body's fat cells. So when you have high insulin, your body is going to increase the fat storage in those fat cells. How do we turn on the switch to burn fat rather than store fat? We need to reduce our insulin level. And reducing that insulin level is one of those things, is to reduce your carb intake. Another one, there's some hacks that we do, which is like, for example, drinking vinegar water, doing some light exercise around 30 to 60 minutes after having maybe a higher carb meal. There's certain things you can do, but the primary one of those is to reduce your carb intake. Reducing your carb intake is not going to spike your insulin level, which will then store that energy in your body's fat cells. So you need to turn that on. If you're doing, like a lot of people do, and I see this all the time, oh, I've had a large carb meal, I've had this sweet, I've had this donut, I have this milkshake, I'm going to go to the gym and burn it off. You're not gonna burn that off. You've spiked your insulin. If your insulin is high, your body doesn't need to turn to its fat stores. Why? Because it's got plenty of energy in your body's bloodstream. Does that make sense? There's no reason for your body to go into your fat cells because it's got plenty of it in its blood. So if your insulin is high, you're never, doesn't matter what you're going to do, you're not going to start tapping into those fat stores. So you need to turn on your body's fat burning switch, which is low insulin levels. That's number one. The second one, as mentioned, is to reduce your energy input, reducing the amount of energy you're consuming. There are two main sources of energy from our food. The first of those is carbs, which you can see here, which is probably maybe the carbs that you're consuming right now. And the other one is fats. Now, fats always think, oh, eating fat is going to make you fat. That is not necessarily true. Carbs and fats are the energy we consume. What you really need to do is you really need to reduce your carb intake. You see, carbs, the issue with carbs is that it's fast fuel, as mentioned. Also, carbs are much easier to consume in higher proportions than fats. It's much more difficult to consume high levels of fats. Fats, yes, they are twice the amount of energy as carbs, but it's much more difficult to consume that in higher proportions. Also, fats, which gets a lot of bad rap nowadays, the problem with consuming fats isn't the fats themselves. As you can see from this picture, it's the fats that carbs are wrapped in and the way fats are used for cooking. So staying away from deep fried stuff is gonna make you more healthier. It's gonna easier for the body to consume the more refined fats rather than the deep cooked fats. But carbs is where all the problems are. So what we want to do when I say reduce your energy input, you really want to reduce your carb intake. That's what you really want to do. And you don't want to be having these types of carbs that you can see on the screen. You want to be having more complex, healthier carbs that have a much higher nutritional profile. And for your fats, rather than having deep fried stuff and fats that you cook your donuts in, you want to be having more quality fats, because your body needs fats. Fats are such an important component of your nutritional profile. So you need to reduce your energy input primarily with having good quality carbs and good quality fats. I hope that makes sense. Now, the third of those is now increasing your energy input, because once you've lowered your insulin level, you've turned on the switch, you're having less energy that your body actually needs for for its day-to-day living. You now need to, in order for the body to tap into those fat stores, because it's got plenty of energy. There's plenty of energy in your fat stores. So how do you get the body to now burn that fat? You need to increase your energy output. Now, people think increase your energy output. What are you saying? Jogging? No. Jogging burns fast fuel. It burns carbs. You want to burn slow fuel. So you want to increase your slow energy output. And the best, most effective, most efficient and simplest way to do that is simply walking. And look at this guy walking here. You can walk anywhere, at any time, at any place, in any attire. You don't need to go to the gym or put on gym kit or do it early in the morning. You can do it anywhere. You can work and walk, as I can show you in this picture. So this is how I prefer to do my working or my walking. I got a sit-stand desk with a walking treadmill and I walk and work. So it doesn't take out any extra time from my day. Do you see? You don't need to take out extra time from your day to burn fat. You just need to eat properly and then move properly. So that's those 3 simple meals of fat burning. Fat burning is simple when you know how. So we've covered how in traditional training provided to you by the fitness industries, it takes so much time out of your day to do the muscle building and the fat burning, and how in the ONE35 body system, it's so simple. All you need is one 35-minute session a week for the muscle building and the fat burning, you can actually easily incorporate that into your day without taking any extra time away from your life. But now let's look at this another thing which actually takes a lot of time and preparation and complication in the whole process of muscle building and fat burning, which is meal preparation. Now, me, for example, I don't know how to cook. I can cook basic, simple stuff like an egg sandwich or making my protein shake, really basic stuff. I don't do any meal preparation other than that. So what I do is I simply split the plate into its macronutrient portions. So here is my split for medium carb days, where my carbs is a bit more than normal because I need that extra carbs to create an insulin spike when you're trying to grow new muscles, but not too much. So I have a bit more carbs on my medium carb days, and then on my low carb days, I can, as you can see, I split that back to only a quarter of the plate. So I don't cook, my beautiful wife cooks delicious food for me, and I just apportion my plate accordingly. Same with my clients and my team members, they also do the same, and they share pictures of what they're eating through the day to show how it fits the different portion sizes for the different days in the program. So super simple. You can't get any more simpler than that. And here's an example of one of my meals. So I always like to start my meals with a bowl of salad. So here I've got a delicious salad. I actually enjoy the salad more than my actual, the main course of the meal. I spice it up with a bit of vinegar, olive oil, lemons, a bit of salt, a bit of pepper. Delicious. Have that before your meal. Lines your stomach and your gut with fiber, also fills your stomach with some of goodness and nutrition. And then, as you can see, I've split my plate. It's a low carb day, so I've got a quarter fibrous carbs, so not the refined carbs, a much better, higher nutritional profile. Also has extra fiber to make that the absorption of the carbs much slower through the system. And then I've got about 3/5 of protein. So simple, so super simple. It makes sticking to your nutrition plan easy, achievable, and long lasting. So that's it. That's how, with the ONE35 program, it only requires a small portion of your time every single week, and it's simple, easily adaptable. It's designed to adapt around your life, your schedule, rather than take over it. Here's the most important thing to understand. Getting into great shape isn't about doing more. It's about doing the right things at the right time in a way your life can actually support. If a system only works when life is perfect, it's not a good system. Real systems work inside real lives. The men who succeed with this aren't fitness fanatics. They're busy, they value their time, and they want strength, health, and confidence, not another hobby. If that sounds like you, this system was built for you. If you want to go deeper, I've put together a free email series, just a 3-minute read a day, where I break down exactly how this works in the real world. Training, nutrition, recovery, life. The link's in the description. You don't need motivation. You need a system that respects your life. That's what ONE35 is about. I'll see you in the next video. For life.